You know what's really inconvenient? When you've spent 3,000 years building a perfectly functional galactic empire, carefully managing trade routes, negotiating with 100 different species, maintaining order across 47 star systems, and then some upstart species you've barely heard of suddenly decides to wall themselves off and tell you to stay away. That's exactly what happened when humanity sealed the frontier. And let me tell you, the Galactic Empire was not pleased. Commander Vex'thara, a Keltorian with more battle ribbons than common sense, stood on the bridge of the Imperial Dreadnought Eternal Dominion, staring at the sensor readouts with what I can only describe as profound irritation, mixed with disbelief. The humans had done something impossible, according to every physicist in the Empire. They'd erected a barrier, not a physical wall, mind you, but an actual space-time disruption across their entire frontier region, sealing off roughly 12 systems in the outer spiral arm. This is absurd, Vex'thara growled, his three-fingered hands clenching the railing. They've been part of the galactic community for barely 2 centuries, and now they think they can just close the door. His science officer, Tasha Kal, tentatively approached with a datapad. Commander, the readings are... well, they're frankly terrifying. The barrier isn't just blocking physical passage, it's creating a complete dimensional seal. Nothing gets in. Nothing gets out. No signals. No matter. No energy signatures beyond basic starlight. Then how, Vex'thara asked with exaggerated patience, did they manage to send us that charming little message? Ah yes, the message. Let me paint you a picture. 3 days ago, every Imperial communications hub, every military outpost, every government building across all 47 systems received the same transmission simultaneously. Not through normal channels. Oh no, that would be too ordinary. The humans had somehow bypassed every encryption, every firewall, every security protocol the Empire had spent centuries perfecting, and delivered their message directly. The transmission was simple, almost insultingly so. A human woman, maybe 40 standard years old, with dark skin and eyes that had seen things no sentient being should ever see, sat at a plain metal desk. Behind her, you could see what looked like a military command center, all business, all efficiency. Her uniform bore the insignia of something called the Frontier Defense Initiative, and her name displayed at the bottom of the screen read Administrator Riona Vasquez. To whom it may concern in the Galactic Empire, she'd said, her voice carrying the kind of calm that comes from absolute certainty. Humanity has sealed our frontier region, effective immediately. This is not a request for negotiation. This is a statement of fact. We are implementing a total quarantine of 12 systems within our designated space. Do not approach the barrier. Do not attempt to breach it. Do not send probes, ships, or communication drones. Consider this your only warning. She'd paused then just long enough for the weight of her words to sink in, and then added with the faintest hint of something that might have been sympathy or might have been pity. We're doing this to protect you. Trust me when I say. You really don't want to know what we're dealing with in here. Stay back, stay safe, and let us handle this. The transmission ended. No explanation, no justification, no opportunity for dialogue. Just click. Done. Good. The Empire, as you might imagine, did not take this well. Within hours, the High Council convened an emergency session. Within days, they dispatched the Eternal Dominion and 3 support cruisers to investigate. The orders were clear. Determine what the humans were up to, assess whether this barrier posed a threat to Imperial interests, and if necessary remind humanity of its place in the galactic hierarchy. Vex'thara had volunteered for the assignment, confident it would be a quick show of force, followed by a strongly worded diplomatic lecture. He'd even joked with his officers about how humans, for all their scientific talent and surprising military capabilities, still hadn't learned proper respect for established power structures. That confidence lasted exactly as long as it took to actually see the barrier. By the ancestral void, someone whispered from the navigation station. The view screen showed what looked like reality itself had been torn. That's the only word for it. Where the barrier began, space took on a quality that made your eyes hurt to look at. A shimmering, iridescent curtain that seemed to exist in too many dimensions at once. It rippled and flowed like liquid mercury. Except mercury doesn't usually cause your instruments to scream in electronic distress. Full stop, Vex'thara ordered, his earlier confidence evaporating faster than water in vacuum. Maintain distance of, let's say, 50,000 kilometers. Teshkal, I want a complete analysis. What exactly are we looking at? The science officer worked in silence for several minutes, his multi-jointed fingers dancing across the console with increasing agitation. Finally, he looked up, his expression somewhere between awe and horror. Commander, I don't think I can adequately explain this. The humans have somehow manipulated the fundamental structure of space-time itself. This isn't force field technology or some kind of advanced shielding. They've created an actual boundary between dimensions, a permanent one. The energy requirements alone should be, well, they should be impossible. Nothing's impossible, Vex'thara muttered, but his hearts weren't in it. According to our calculations, Teshkal continued, pulling up holographic displays that made absolutely no knowns to anyone watching. Maintaining this barrier would require the equivalent energy output of a dozen stars, continuously, for the foreseeable future, and somehow, they're doing it without any detectable power source. A junior officer, young, inexperienced, still capable of asking obvious questions, raised a tentacle. Why would they need something this extreme? What could possibly require sealing off 12 entire systems? Everyone looked at Vex'thara. He looked at the barrier. The barrier, unhelpfully, said nothing. Send a communication drone, the commander ordered. Basic diplomatic protocols. Request a meeting with Administrator Vasquez or whoever's in charge over there. Let's at least try to do this properly. The drone launched, approached the barrier, and ceased to exist. Not exploded, that would have been comprehensible. It simply stopped being. One moment it was there, the next moment it wasn't, with absolutely no transition between states. The sensors registered nothing. No energy discharge, no debris, no gravitational anomaly, just instantaneous non-existence. Well, Vex'thara said after a long, uncomfortable silence. That was ominous. Should we try again? The junior officer asked. Absolutely not. They waited, unsure what else to do, when the view screen suddenly activated on its own. The same human woman from the warning message appeared, except now she looked tired, deeply, profoundly tired, like someone who'd been fighting a war for years without rest. Commander Vex'thara of the Keltorian Navy, Vasquez said without preamble. I appreciate that you followed standard Imperial protocol by trying to make contact. I also appreciate that you stopped at a safe distance instead of immediately attempting to breach the barrier. That shows wisdom, or at least survival instinct. Vex'thara straightened, trying to project authority despite the unsettling fact that she'd known his name, rank, and species, without him providing any information. Administrator Vasquez, I'm here on behalf of the Galactic Empire. To assert dominance, demand explanations, and threaten consequences if we don't comply with Imperial oversight, she interrupted. Yes, I know. I've read the Empire's standard first contact protocols. Very thorough, very predictable. Unfortunately, this situation is neither standard nor predictable. So let me save us both some time. She leaned forward, her hands clasped on the desk, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of someone delivering news they wished they didn't have to deliver. 6 months ago, one of our research stations in the Kepler 442 system detected an anomaly. We thought it was a natural phenomenon, some kind of rare gravitational fluctuation. We sent a team to investigate. Standard procedure, qualified scientists, proper safety protocols. They never came back. The view screen behind her changed, showing sensor logs and scientific data that Teshkal was already frantically trying to analyze. Vex'thara saw numbers, waveforms, and energy signatures that made his translator implant struggle to find appropriate terminology. We sent a search and rescue mission, Vasquez continued, her expression hardening. Then we sent a military reconnaissance squad. Then we sent a full battle group with our best technology and our most experienced commanders. Want to guess how many survivors we retrieved? The silence on the Eternal Dominion's bridge was absolute. Zero, Vasquez said flatly. Zero survivors. But we did recover some data, fragmentary recordings, corrupted sensor logs, and one absolutely terrifying final transmission from Captain Kale Okafor, who had commanded our rescue fleet. He used his last moments to send one message to Earth Command. Don't let it spread. Whatever it takes, don't let it spread. She paused, letting that sink in. Then continued with the kind of calm that comes from accepting an impossible situation. We mobilized everything. Called in every favor. Activated every sleeper project. Threw our entire scientific community at the problem. Turned out, humans have a peculiar talent when we're properly motivated, especially when the alternative is extinction. What? Vex'thara found his voice, though it came out rougher than intended. What are you containing in there? Vasquez smiled, but there was no humor in it, only grim determination. Something that makes your worst nightmares look like pleasant daydreams. Something that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously and treats physical laws as suggestions rather than rules. Something that learns, adapts, and spreads faster than any conventional defense can stop. We call it the Cascade, not because we understand what it is, but because that's what it does. It cascades through reality itself, corrupting everything it touches, turning matter and energy something else. The data on screen shifted, showing before and after images of the research station. The before looked normal, standard orbital facility, gleaming white habitation modules, sensor arrays pointing toward the stars. The after looked like someone had taken reality, twisted it into impossible angles, and then forgotten what solid matter was supposed to look like. Structures existed in geometries that shouldn't be possible, surfaces reflected light that wasn't there, and worst of all, you could see what looked like movement in the distortions. Purposeful, intelligent movement. We tried everything, Vasquez said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Conventional weapons, exotic matter bombs, dimensional disruption fields, even a prototype temporal reversal device that nearly destroyed our own fleet. Nothing worked. The Cascade just adapted, integrated our attacks into itself, and kept spreading. Within 3 weeks, it had consumed the entire research station, 2 nearby mining colonies, and was heading toward inhabited systems. Teshkal's voice cracked when he spoke. If conventional methods didn't work, how did you stop it? Vasquez's expression shifted, and here's where things got really interesting. Because what crossed her face wasn't pride or relief, but something closer to regret. We didn't stop it, science officer, we couldn't. The Cascade is still active inside the quarantine zone. Still spreading, still consuming. What we did was more desperate, more permanent, and frankly, more terrifying than the thing we're trying to contain. She stood up, walked out of frame for a moment, then returned with what looked like a physical file folder. Actual paper, which told you how seriously humanity was taking information security. 3 months ago, we received an unexpected communication from Dr. Hikaru Sato, one of our theoretical physicists who'd been working on fringe science projects that most people considered academic fantasy. He claimed he had a solution, not to destroy the Cascade, but to isolate it completely, to cut it off from the rest of reality so thoroughly that it might as well not exist. The view screen split, showing an elderly Japanese man with wild gray hair and eyes that burned with the kind of manic brilliance that either saves civilizations or dooms them. His recorded message played, and even through the translation matrix, you could hear the mixture of excitement and horror in his voice. Administrator Vasquez, the recording said, I know how to save humanity. I also know you're going to hate me for it. The Cascade exists partially outside normal space-time. That's why it's immune to conventional attacks. But what if we could force all of reality in the affected region to exist outside normal space-time? Create a complete dimensional severance, a true barrier between here and there. It would require energy beyond anything we've attempted, technology we'd have to invent on the fly. Well, sacrifices that I'm not entirely comfortable with. Dr. Sato had paused then, his expression becoming haunted. We'd need to weaponize the dimensional research from the Kazan project. All of it. Every piece of technology we've kept classified for the past 60 years. And we'd need volunteers, people willing to stay inside the quarantine zone to maintain the barrier generators from the interior. Because once the seal is complete, there's no coming back. Ever. Vex'thara felt his primary stomach drop. You sealed people inside. With that thing. 43,000 volunteers, Vasquez confirmed, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was saying. Military personnel, scientists, engineers, colonists who'd already been exposed to the Cascade's influence and knew they couldn't leave anyway. Captain Elena Kovac commanded the Interior Defense Force. Professor Jamal Washington led the scientific team. They had 3 weeks to build the barrier generators, position them throughout the 12 systems, and synchronize the activation sequence. She pulled up new footage, interior shots of what looked like massive construction projects happening at impossible speed. Humans in environmental suits working side by side with autonomous systems and AI constructs, building structures that seemed to defy physics even before they were activated. You could see the desperation in their movements, the certainty that they were racing against something worse than death. The activation was complicated, Vasquez continued with masterful understatement. Turns out forcing 12 entire star systems out of phase with the rest of reality requires more than just pressing a button. It requires a network of quantum-entangled cores, each one maintained by conscious thought. Human consciousness specifically, because apparently our neural patterns have just the right quantum signature to stabilize the dimensional mathematics. A junior officer on the Eternal Dominion made a sound halfway between a gasp and a retch. You're using your people as living batteries for a dimensional prison. Living processors, actually, Vasquez corrected with clinical precision. The barrier cores don't drain life energy or anything mystical like that, but they do require constant mental engagement with the quantum field equations. Think of it as the universe's most important meditation exercise, except you can never stop or the whole thing collapses. Our volunteers underwent extensive neural augmentation to handle the cognitive load. They'll live normal lifespans, possibly longer due to the temporal dilation effects inside the barrier. They just won't ever leave. Vex'thara was beginning to understand why humanity had issued a warning instead of an explanation. This wasn't just frontier defense. This was cosmic-level damage control wrapped in a nightmare scenario that the Empire's ethics committees would debate for centuries. And if the barrier fails, then the Cascade spreads into your territory, Vasquez said bluntly. Which is why I need you to understand something, Commander. We're not being hostile. We're not asserting independence or challenging imperial authority. We're protecting everyone, including ourselves, from something that treats the laws of physics like suggestions and sentient life like raw material. The barrier stays up, the Cascade stays contained, and everyone outside gets to keep existing in a universe that still makes sense. Teshkal had been analyzing the data Vasquez provided, and now he spoke up with the kind of trembling reverence usually reserved for religious experiences. Commander, if I'm reading this correctly, humanity didn't just build a barrier. They've created a stable artificial pocket dimension. The energy equations alone suggest they've achieved what the Empire's top physicists have said was impossible for at least another 1,000 years of research. And they did it in 3 months. Necessity, science officer, Vasquez said with a tired smile. You'd be amazed that humans can accomplish when extinction is the alternative. We're really quite good at last-minute impossible solutions. It's practically our species-defining trait at this point. Vex'thara looked at the barrier on his view screen, seeing it now not as a wall but as a monument to desperate ingenuity. What do you need from the Empire? The question seemed to surprise Vasquez. Need? You're maintaining a dimensional prison containing an existential threat to galactic civilization, Vex'thara said, his voice taking on a tone his crew had never heard before. Something like respect mixed with awe. You've sacrificed 43,000 of your people to keep the rest of us safe from something we didn't even know existed. The least the Empire can do is, I don't know, acknowledge that. Provide resources, not be complete idiots about this. Vasquez actually laughed, short, sharp, and genuine. Honestly, Commander, we'd settle for you staying back and not trying to help. No offense to Imperial engineering, But your technology isn't designed to interact with dimensional barriers. If you tried to study it too closely, you might destabilize the field harmonics. If you tried to breach it, well, remember what happened to that communication drone. Instant non-existence, the junior officer supplied helpfully. Right. Except with your dreadnought, the non-existence would cascade backwards along your approach vector, potentially taking out everything in a 10,000-kilometer radius. The barrier doesn't just stop things, it removes them from causality entirely. We've fine-tuned it to only affect objects attempting to cross the threshold. But testing those limits seems like a spectacularly bad idea. Vex'thara made a decision that would later be cited in imperial military academies as either brilliant pragmatism or cowardly surrender, depending on which instructor you asked. Understood, Administrator. The Eternal Dominion will maintain a monitoring position at safe distance and relay your situation to the High Council. I'll recommend that the Empire establish a formal exclusion zone around your barrier and provide any support you request, assuming you ever request it. Appreciated, Commander. Though I should mention one more thing before you go make your report. Vasquez's expression turned serious again, that same haunted look from earlier returning. The volunteers inside aren't just maintaining the barrier, they're also studying the Cascade, trying to understand what it is and where it came from. Captain Kovac sent us one last data packet before the seal completed. And, well, it contained some concerning information. More concerning than a reality-eating anomaly? Teshkal asked weakly. Potentially, yes. The Cascade shows signs of being artificially created, engineered for lack of a better word. Its structure is too precise, too purposeful. Someone or something made this, Commander. And if they made one, they might have made others, which means the galaxy might have bigger problems than humanity closing its borders. The weight of that revelation settled over the bridge like a shroud. Vex'thara found himself reassessing everything he'd thought about this mission, about humanity, about the comfortable certainty of the Empire's dominance. Do you have any idea who created it? Not yet, but we're working on it, both outside and inside the barrier. The interior teams have the advantage of being able to study the Cascade up close without worrying about infection, since they're already sealed in. If they discover anything useful, we have a one-way communication protocol that lets them send data out. It's limited, slow, and unreliable, but it's better than nothing. And if they find the creators? Vasquez's smile turned predatory, the kind of smile that reminded Vex'thara why humanity, despite being relative newcomers to the galactic stage, had earned a reputation for being dangerous when cornered. Then we'll add that information to our very long list of things to be prepared for. Humans don't forget threats, Commander. We catalog them, study them, and develop countermeasures, even if it takes centuries. The Cascade caught us off guard once. It won't happen again, and whatever created it should probably start worrying about what happens when humanity decides to go looking for answers. The transmission ended, leaving Vex'thara staring at empty space where Vasquez's image had been. His crew waited for orders, for guidance, for some indication of how they were supposed to process what they'd just learned. Navigation, Vex'thara finally said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his thoughts. Plot a course back to Imperial space. Communications, prepare a full report for the High Council, include everything we've witnessed and all data Teshkal collected. Mark this region as forbidden territory, highest classification level. What should we tell them? The communications officer asked. About humanity's intentions? Vex'thara considered the question, thinking about the volunteers inside the barrier, about the impossible technology humanity had created under pressure, about the calm certainty in Administrator Vasquez's voice when she talked about protecting the galaxy. Tell them that humanity has erected a dimensional barrier to contain an existential threat. Tell them that we're not dealing with rebellious colonists or territorial expansion. We're dealing with a species that just saved us all from something we didn't know existed. And tell them that the Empire's official position should be gratitude, not interference. Sir, the junior officer sounded confused. The High Council won't like— I don't particularly care what the High Council likes, Vex'thara interrupted, surprising himself with his own vehemence. I care about maintaining galactic stability and not provoking a species that just demonstrated the ability to manipulate dimensions with 3 months of focused effort. Humanity sealed the frontier to protect us, not to threaten us. The least we can do is respect that and stay the hell out of their way. As the Eternal Dominion began its long journey back to Imperial space, Vex'thara stood at the view screen, watching the barrier shimmer and pulse with energies that shouldn't exist. Somewhere beyond that impossible curtain, 43,000 humans were spending the rest of their lives maintaining a prison for something that ate reality itself. They'd never see their homes again, never walk under an open sky, never escape the responsibility they'd accepted. And they'd done it to save people who barely knew they existed. The junior officer approached hesitantly. "Commander, do you think we'll ever know what really happened in there? What the Cascade actually is?" Vex'thara continued staring at the barrier, watching it pulse like a living heartbeat, which, in a way, it was. Maybe. But I'll tell you what I do know. Humanity just taught the entire Empire a lesson about sacrifice, about ingenuity under pressure, and about the lengths some species will go to protect others. We've been running this galaxy for 3,000 years, convinced we had everything figured out. Then some upstart species we've known for 2 centuries seals off 12 systems, tells us to stay back for our own good, and actually has a valid reason for doing it. What does that mean for the Empire? It means, Vex'thara said slowly, that maybe we should start paying more attention to humanity, not as subjects to manage or territories to administrate, but as equals, partners. Because if they can build dimensional barriers in 3 months when faced with extinction, I really don't want to find out what they could build in 3 years if they decided the Empire needed reforming. The view screen showed the barrier one last time before the Eternal Dominion jumped to hyperspace, a shimmering curtain of impossible physics, maintained by human will and desperation, holding back nightmares the galaxy had been lucky enough to never see. Behind that barrier, 43,000 volunteers went about their vigil, keeping the monsters at bay so everyone else could sleep soundly at night. And at her desk in the Frontier Defense Initiative headquarters, Administrator Riona Vasquez allowed herself a small smile before turning to her next crisis, because there was always a next crisis when you were responsible for humanity's security. The galaxy would learn in time that when humans said stay back for your own good, they weren't being dramatic or territorial. They were being honest. And that honesty, backed by impossible technology and unshakable determination, was perhaps the most terrifying thing about them. The Empire got the message. They stayed back, and they started preparing for a future where humanity's warnings carried the weight of dimensional physics and sacrifice that defied comprehension. Because if there's one thing you learn about humans, whether you want to or not, it's that they'll do whatever it takes to protect what they care about, even if it means sealing themselves away from the rest of reality. And really, when you think about it, that's both the most inspiring and most terrifying trait a species can have.